Hey guys, welcome to my first drive video on BMW's recently facelifted G80 M3 saloon. This particular car belongs to a good friend of mine and the best BMW salesman in the country, Mr. Tony Lewis. You probably guessed that though, looking at those number plates. TRL deals on Instagram. This updated LCI version comes with a few subtle changes on the outside and on the inside. And on top of all of that, Tony has been down to our friends at Motec to get a few OEM plus modifications done. So let's quickly run through all of those now. Let's start with the factory updates. Around the front end, we've got new headlamp units. They're LEDs, you can no longer get the laser light option. Then we get around the side of the car and you might have noticed those gorgeous 825 silver wheels. Don't they look stunning, especially against this black sapphire paintwork? And that's kind of it on the LCI M3 in terms of updates on the outside. But now let's talk about what Tony has done with Motec. So you might have noticed that behind the TRL number plate, we have the gorgeous CS-CSL grille, which looks really good. Also, this car doesn't have the carbon exterior pack. And you might know that the base M3 comes with a mesh here. Well, Tony and Motec replaced that mesh with essentially what you'd get on the carbon pack, but instead of carbon, it's piano black. Really suits the front end of the car, especially if you're going for the CS style grills. And because Tony is such a tart, he's also fitted the 50th anniversary badges. As you probably know, I'm not the biggest fan of the, all right, Tony? Oh, mate, this is the perfect spec, mate. Yeah, everything, I love all of it. Before we get around the back of the car, can I just point out that this car is fitted with Michelin's Pilot Sport 4S tyres that are star marked, meaning that they're homologated for the M3 and the M4. We have this carbon M Performance rear boot lip spoiler. Normally wouldn't be my cup of tea, but it does really suit this car. We've got these rear light units, which are rear laser lights. We first saw them on the M4 CSL. You can't actually option them on an M3 Saloon or an M3 Touring, but once again, these are from Motec Performance, and once again, they look really good because they are kind of an OEM plus option. I think they suit the rear end of this car. Something else to point out is this does have the carbon roof, which is standard on this LCI M3 and was standard on the pre-LCI, but you can now option in a sunroof. But obviously, if you go for the sunroof, then you delete the carbon roof. So would be a tough decision. You'd really need that sunroof to lose that beautiful carbon and lack of weight up high. Last thing to talk about before we get this out on the road is they have given this S58 a slight power increase. Just as a reminder, it's a 3-litre inline-6 twin turbo. It used to produce 510 horsepower. It now produces 530 horsepower. The torque figure of 650 newton meters is unchanged. So they've kind of bridged the gap between the pre-LCI M3 competition and the M3 CS. And I'm looking forward to trying it because people that I've spoken to, including Mr. Tony Lewis, have said that it is noticeable. And you wouldn't necessarily think that from an extra 20 horsepower. That'll run through a ZF 8-speed automatic gearbox and is fed to the ground via BMW's M xDrive system. BMW claim that this will do the 0 to 62 sprint in just 3.5 seconds, which is an improvement over the pre-LCI car, and that does back up people like Tony saying that it does feel quicker. Before we close this bonnet, there have been, you guessed it, a couple of extra modifications that Tony and Motec have done. First one, most important one, is the beautiful E-Venturi carbon air intake. I've run one of these in pretty much all of my recent M3s and I absolutely love it. It helps with the pickup, it sounds awesome, the induction sound, and it looks beautiful when you've got the bonnet open, which I know isn't that often. To complement that, he's also got the carbon engine cover, which is something that BMW really should offer on the configurator because it just improves the way this whole engine bay looks and comes together. Anyway, we haven't got long with this car. Let's jump in, get it out on the road, look at the changes that have been done in the cabin and see if I can notice any differences in terms of driving dynamics compared to the pre-facelift car. I've really struggled to find a decent road in Kent that has a speed limit higher than 40 miles an hour. I used to know a couple of good roads down here, and that's kind of where I ventured out to, because Tony and Barry BMW are based in Croydon, so not so far. But all of the roads that used to be 50s or mostly 60s are now 40s, and there's no reasoning for it. They're nice, big, open A and B roads. I mean, look at the state of the road. Surely they could have spent all that money on changing the signage on the actual road surface itself. It would have made the road a lot safer than just reducing the speed limit. Anyway, rant over. Let's get on to talking about the updates of the inside of this updated M3 competition. Well, the first and most obvious change is the steering wheel in front of me. It's no longer circular, it's actually flat bottomed, which is ironic because I think it was Audi who started the flat bottom wheel, and Audi have only just started going to the double flattened wheel, so flat at the top and flat at the bottom, and now BMW have gone flat at the bottom. Anyway, it feels okay, but you probably know what I'm about to say. Unfortunately, the actual rim thickness has got bigger, so there's more girth, if you like, and I'm not a fan of that. I did try a similar wheel for the first time much earlier this year when I got to briefly drive the M4 CS. I never really made a video on that car because the weather and the time was against me in Germany, but the wheel in that car was really bad. It was Alcantara, it was super thick, and yeah, I just didn't like it at all. This one is a little bit better, but personally I prefer the pre-facelift wheel. I like round wheels, and I like rims of wheels which are a bit thinner, but that's just personal choice. Other changes in here, well, they've removed the traditional vents from the center of the dashboard here and replaced them with this new style. I guess it's cleaned it up a little bit. Tony prefers the LCI. I probably prefer the pre-LCI, but there's really not much in it, and these seem to function just as well, and I guess that's the most important thing, isn't it? You want that cold or warm air to come out in the direction that you want it to come out in, and seems to do a very good job of that. We got operating system 8.5 on the curved display, lovely iDrive controller. All of this is completely unchanged. This particular car has the M Sport seats, I think they call them, so the non-bucket seats in Fiona Red, and I have to say they're very, very comfortable. They're very, very nice to spend time in, and the Fiona Red contrasts very well with the black paintwork. But otherwise, everything else in here, as far as I can tell, is pretty much unchanged. You do get less standard equipment on the LCI. So although BMW have increased the price slightly, they have also pulled out some of the standard equipment that you got in the pre-LCI. Not much. You still get a lot of standard equipment, but you don't get the same amount that you did in the pre-LCI car. So make sure you check that out properly when you're on the configurator. Now, I've spent about an hour in this car looking for a half decent road, so I feel like I've gotten to know it a little bit already. And the first thing that's stood out for me is the ride quality appears to have got a little bit better. So when I'm in comfort or default, which I'm in at the moment, everything just seems to be a little bit softer. Very much like the M3 CS. A lot of people assume that the CS is going to be hard-edged and race car-like, and although it would get down your local A or B road or your local track, get around that quicker than a regular M3 competition, actually what BMW seem to do with the CS iterations is just give them a nicer suspension. They seem to make the dampers work a little bit better, and in practice that just makes everything feel like it's a little bit softer, and that's exactly what this LCI M3 feels like. It just feels a bit softer. The edge has been taken off when you're in comfort, which can only be a win for any M3 customer, because let's face it, like me, you're probably using your M3 as a daily tool on top of everything else. Let's now ramp things up a little bit. I'm going to hit my preset M2 button. Apologies about that, Tony. I've probably ruined a lot of your settings there. That gives me Sport Plus on the engine, Sport in the chassis, so stiffen those dampers up a little bit. Steering in Comfort, we'll talk about why in a second. Brakes in Sport, because I like that extra assistance. Four-wheel drive Sport, and all the traction stability switched off, although I'm not going to be pushing it that hard today, so that would make next to no difference. And also it gives me manual gears, so I've got manual override. Thankfully this car retains these really nice carbon paddles. Let's start with steering feel. Now, once again, like the CS, this LCI car definitely has more steering feel. And that's something that I've complained about with all G-Series M cars. I noticed that straight away, even sitting at 20 miles an hour, crawling through Croydon, I could feel that the steering definitely has been tweaked, adjusted. It's probably all software related, but definitely feels a lot better. Now we can talk about the wonderful S58. Put our foot down for the first time. Oh my goodness. Well, like I said on the outside, I spoke to a couple of people, including Tony, who have all said that the facelifted car feels noticeably quicker than the pre-facelift car. And once again, I have to say, compared to my M3 Touring, which is a very, very quick car, this does feel noticeably faster. It reacts quicker to the throttle inputs, and I am aware that this does have an e-Venturi intake, which definitely helps with sort of that low down pickup especially, but I've got an e-Venturi intake in my car, so it's like for like. But if we take that out of the equation, the way it picks up, we're in second now, 2,500 RPM, put my foot down, there's a shorter pause there, and then once it gets into its stride, it's really quick, this car. My goodness. Really, really fast. I mean, it's not night and day quicker than the old one or my M3 Touring, but you do notice that extra fizz, especially at the top. And once again, I'm going to compare that to the M3 CS. And this one, although on paper it's only 20 horsepower, which in a car that weighs, I think it's nearly 1,900 kilos, well, you wouldn't expect to feel that, but you really do. You feel all of it. You feel that initial pickup. As I pick the throttle up now, oh, I just, it's so fast. Yeah, really, really quick. So, great improvements. More steering feel. The remap that they've done to the engine is great. And there's one more bonus and positive, and that is the gearbox. Now, I've never sort of complained about the shift times on the gearbox, but they've definitely tweaked something, because the shift time, it just feels a little bit snappier on the way up and on the way down. So that's just great. More steering feel, better response, and a punchier engine, and a quicker gearbox. I mean, what's not to love? Also, when we knock everything back again into comfort, so I cancel my M2 button, we get that lovely improved ride quality. So they really have worked on everything with this car, and to me it just feels like it's much more of an M3 CS now than it was or is an M3 competition, and all of that is a good thing. It's interesting, a lot of manufacturers are doing that. Let's look at the new Porsche 992.2 GT3. Well, that latest GT3 model seems to have stolen a lot of the benefits and parts off the very special ST version. I'm sure that won't please ST owners, but what they've learned with the ST, they've taken the good bits and put it in the GT3, and I really think that's what BMW have done with this. They've taken the good bits, which pretty much all the bits from the M3 CS, and put it into this car, even though most of that is software related. Now, of course, this car retains the brilliant MX drive, and I could switch between four-wheel drive sport, where it sends a lot more power and torque to the rear axle, or two-wheel drive, where it sends all of that power and torque to the rear axle. But we already know that this chassis and this setup deals with a lot of power just going through the rear wheels. But it's great to see that we can still use that mode in this car. In fact, when I've taken any of my G Series M3s out to the Alps and stuff, and when I have a bit more fun and sort of get the driver involved more in it, then I'll put it back into two-wheel drive and all the traction off, because at least then you have to think about sort of giving it full throttle out of first, second, and sometimes third gear hairpins. But if I slow this down a bit and put it into a lower gear, well, I know that at any time I could spark up that rear axle. So let's just put it into first here. And but it hooks up so quickly and so efficiently. That M rear diff, it's so good in these G Series cars. And yeah, probably once again, BMW have tweaked that to work a little bit better. They've learnt things off the M3 CS and probably the M4 CSL, but it's great. I love it. And just knowing now I'm sitting here, damp patches on the road, just being careful, I've got all the traction off, rear wheel drive, just adds all of that involvement back into the car. You know, I'm not just able to come out here and stick my foot on the floor. I've got to think about it, assess everything, and that is all part of driver sort of fun. And I think when the G80 M3 Competition X Drive hit the market, and when I got my original Dravik grey one, a lot of people were like, oh, you shouldn't have got rid of your rear wheel drive. And the rear wheel drive, don't get me wrong, is probably still the most purest version of the G Series M3. It is lighter and traditionally rear wheel drive, but the great thing with these MX drive cars is with literally a touch of a button down there or one of these preset buttons up here, and it transforms it and turns it back into an old school rear wheel drive M car, but this time with well over 500 horsepower, 530 horsepower. Well, that's what BMW say anyway. To me, it feels a lot quicker than 530 horsepower. Oh my God. Yeah, that is something special. Let's test out this car's claimed acceleration figures. BMW say it will do the 0 to 62 sprint in just 3.5 seconds. I'm in four-wheel drive and I've got all the traction and stability switched off. I'm going to let the gearbox do the shifting. My Racebox Mini is down here and ready to go. Left foot is hard on the brake, right foot on the accelerator. Here we go. Oh my God. 3.08 seconds. Nearly 3 seconds flat, and 1.11 to 30 miles an hour. Oh my goodness gracious. Oh, that actually hurt my head. Before that light completely disappears and before Tony Lewis finishes work and realizes he doesn't have a car to get home in, I need to give you some kind of conclusion around this updated and facelifted G80 M3 competition. Overall, it's an improvement, but there are some negatives, so let's start with them. Price increase. I mean, it's kind of to be expected because that's just the way of the market at the moment. But the fact that BMW have increased the price a bit and reduced the standard options is a little bit cheeky. But once again, I think it represents good value for the performance, luxury, and practicality that it offers. My other slight negative is to do with this steering wheel, but I know that's more of a personal thing. At least BMW have gone to some effort to change some things in the interior. My other slight gripe is the fact that you can't option those wonderful laser lights anymore. I will miss them because at night, nothing beats them. And also, as a light unit, just to look at as a piece of art, they're wonderful with the blue little details inside, etc. It's a shame that you can't get them. Now let's move on to the positives. The first one has to be the silver wheel option. I think they look absolutely wonderful. Then the next lot of positives are all around the driving experience. The ride quality is definitely improved a little bit, especially when you're in comfort. And the driving dynamics in pretty much every area have just got a little bit better. And it's amazing that BMW have done that. And to me, it definitely feels more M3 CS than M3 competition pre-LCI. And I think that's the biggest compliment I could pay this car. It is slightly faster. I get more steering feel. The response as well from the throttle is just a little bit better. The handling is just a little bit better. Everything is just a little bit better. And I really do take my hat off to BMW for achieving that with this car, because well, they didn't really need to do that. They could have just given it a slightly bigger power figure, and that's what most people would have talked about. But as an overall package, it is a better, more impressive car, which is saying something, because the pre-LCI is pretty darn good. And lastly, big thanks to Tony Lewis and Barry BMW for throwing me the keys to this wonderful car for the past few hours. I will never try and review a car again in and around these roads in this area, because it's a nightmare. There's so much traffic. The road quality and surface is horrible. The speed limits are just ridiculous. Having a car like this in this area is just frustrating, if anything. I think I've been very lucky. I've spent a lot of time abroad recently on beautiful roads with much better speed limits, etc., etc. So coming back to the UK and filming a few videos has been a stressful experience, but a wonderful car all the same. So thanks for watching. Make sure you do give Tony Lewis a follow on Instagram. I'll put a link to his Instagram in the description below. Also a link to his email if you're looking at buying yourself a new M like BMW or full M car like this M3 competition LCI. Right, it's probably getting very dark in here now, so I'm going to say goodbye. Goodbye.